Hello students, secondary 1 chemistry. Now we are still in thermochemistry. This is the last lesson in unit 4 thermochemistry, Hess's law. Sometimes it is possible to calculate delta H practically, to determine delta H practically using the calorimeter. But sometimes also it is impossible or very hard to measure delta H practically if the reaction is dangerous, or if the reaction is very slow, or if the conditions are of the reaction cannot be controlled. In this case, we depend on Hess's law, which is a mathematical law. This law states that the heat of the reaction is a constant amount in standard condition, whether the reaction is carried out in one step or in more than one step. The idea depends on other chemical, thermochemical equations. We can use these other thermochemical equations to determine delta H of a reaction. Depending on the law, delta H equal delta H for the first step in the reaction, delta H2 for the second reaction, step of the reaction, and delta H3 for the third, and so on. We can determine delta H of the required reaction. So, for example, if we want to calculate delta H for this reaction, delta H is required for this reaction. Using the above two equations of known delta H's, we can calculate the delta H of this reaction. It's clear that this required reaction is the sum of these two equations. By adding these two equations, the left-hand side of the two equations with the right-hand side of the two equations, we can get this equation. So delta H for this required equation is the sum of these two equations. So we add these two numbers together, delta H1, this is delta H1, this is delta H2. Another example is calculation of the heat of formation of carbon monoxide using the above two equations. We have an equation C plus half O2 to get CO. This is the required equation. This equation represents the heat of formation of carbon monoxide, and this equation, this reaction is accompanied by heat change, delta H. The required equation is this one. How to calculate delta H of this equation? It is clear that to get this equation, you must subtract the second from the first. So if you subtract minus 393 minus 283.3, you can get the delta H of this equation. Again, this equation is obtained from subtraction of by subtracting this equation from this equation. So this equation minus this equation gives this equation. So delta H of this equation is equal to the difference between this one minus this one. Okay. Thank you for listening.